What's up, guys? My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm editor of IGN PlayStation. This is a PlayStation Conversation. I'm here with Mitch Dyer.
Beyond.
Thank you. I appreciate that. He's the associate editor of IGN Xbox. And you might be wondering, what is an Xbox editor doing on a PlayStation Conversation? This is his very first one. Well, it has to do with Final Fantasy Versus 13 and a conversation that Mitch and I had this morning on Twitter. But it also surrounds the Kotaku rumor that we posted a few days ago saying that Final Fantasy Versus 13 was canceled. And now we know that that's not true. Square Enix CEO Yoichi Wada tweeted that the rumor is, quote, false. And then he just got out of a meeting right before he tweeted about the game, and he said, quote, "If you saw the presentation of the city, it'd knock you off your feet." He also said LOL, which I thought was really funny.
Well,
but I tweeted about this very sarcastically this morning. I said Final Fantasy 13, or Versus 13 isn't canceled after all. I'm positive it will live up to its over 6-year development cycle. Mitch had some things to say about that, and I thought I'd drag him into a PlayStation Conversation to talk a bit about it. So Mitch, where do you stand on Square's long development cycle with Final Fantasy 13, Versus 13? What does it mean?
So, primarily, I think announcing it 6 years ago is probably a bad idea. If it wasn't supposed to come out until now, or later than now, obviously, then announcing it 6 years ago was probably a terrible idea. Granted, they probably announced it 6 years ago with the idea that, hey, we'll release this in a couple of years. Obviously, that didn't happen. Final Fantasy 13 came out, it's been dragging out sequels. Who knows where 13 is at now? Versus 13. Yeah,
it's hard. I gotta keep putting verses in front of 13. It's worth noting that in 2006, at that same presentation, Final Fantasy 13 and Final Fantasy Type 0, the game that would become Type 0 or Type O, were also announced, and those games had come out on PS3/360 and PSP respectively already. So there's something wrong with this game, and this kind of harkens us back to what's going on with Team Ico and Studio Japan on the Sony side with The Last Guardian, about games that seem to be caught in development hell and developers kind of getting ahead of themselves. And what this says to me is that Square Enix really is falling from grace. And I know you have something to say about that as well. Do you think that this is kind of unfair to say about the company?
Yeah, I mean, Square's been doing great work with Final Fantasy 13 and 13-2, and whatever else is coming in the pipes I'm sure will be great. And they've had other great stuff in the works in the past 6 years. And I think singling this one game out as Square's downfall is not necessarily fair. But at the same time, it's clearly a bad situation. This game is in rough shape. It's probably been canceled 1 or 2 times and restarted.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think that the rumor on Kotaku said that some of it was folded into Final Fantasy 15, and I'm not sure where they got that information and really what's going on with the game. It's very interesting. But I will say that I don't think Square Enix's fall from grace is really, it's something that you can chronicle. I mean, think about the 90s when we were playing games like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy 4 and Final Fantasy 6, Secret of Mana, all of these games, these really excellent games. Everyone kind of rallies around these games as being great. And even in the early 2000s, you have some divisive games, but also some games that people think are great, Final Fantasy X, for instance. But as we get further and further, we start having Square internally developed games that are not really well received generally. But I think that Square Enix is kind of falling apart a little bit, and I think it's really interesting.
I don't know that it's necessarily a fall from grace so much as a refocus, because we've seen Square Enix kind of realign what it wants to do with games. We're seeing them with the acquisition of IGN moving toward publishing stuff like Tomb Raider and Hitman and Sleeping Dogs, a bunch of stuff that is more focused on the West. And I wonder if maybe that's taken away from their resources in Japan in some capacity.
It could be. I still think that it's more an issue of what's keeping them alive at this point. I think that when you look at their internal development and what's coming from IGN and even what's coming from Enix, which they combined with in 2003, and they got Dragon Quest, which is really bigger than Final Fantasy, much bigger than Final Fantasy. When you look at all of those things generally, I think that it looks like other things are keeping Square alive, and at this point you have to wonder what's going on internally with them, because their internally developed games just don't seem to be what they once were. But let's leave it at this, Mitch. Let's say this. I got this question on Twitter today that I think you can answer for me. What will come out first, Final Fantasy Versus 13 or The Last Guardian?
At this point, The Last Guardian, because they're working on it now. There's more studios working on it now.
What was that?
That phone has something to say.
So you say The Last Guardian will come out?
Yeah, because at this point we know that some people are working on it. We have no idea what's going on with Versus 13.
Yeah, I'm interested as well in what's going on. I still say that if The Last Guardian comes out at all, it'll be a PS4 game. Maybe we'll see it at TGS, I don't know. For Final Fantasy Versus 13, who the hell knows what's going on? Hopefully we get some clarity on it in the coming months, maybe at TGS. There's also a Final Fantasy event going on in Japan in about a month, right? So maybe we'll learn more about it then. In the meantime, keep it tuned to IGN for all things PlayStation and all things Xbox, and basically all things video games as well. Beyond.
Beyond. I agree. Basically, can we just get an announcement for ActRaiser right now? Like a new ActRaiser? That'd be good.
ActRaiser 3.
That's not gonna happen, guys. Sorry.
Come on, Damon.